All right. Hello. Uh, my name is Adam Szymanski. Salam alaikum to friends and colleagues in the region. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here in my capacity as the president of KAPSARC. I'm delighted to see so many people joining us today to explore aspects of the circular carbon economy concept. KAPSARC engaged with leading international organizations to write a series of reports on carbon management that form the basis of what we call the CCE guide. The cornerstone of the collaboration has been that each of the participants has full independence and control over the content of their reports. The CCE webinar series will explore the key results of those studies. I'd like to offer a very warm welcome today to our special guest, Kevin Lane from the International Energy Agency. Kevin will be talking about the role of energy efficiency in the circular carbon economy. First, let me say a little bit about KAPSARC. We're an independent nonprofit energy resource think tank in Saudi Arabia. Our mission is to advance the understanding of energy, economics, and the environment, and to act as a catalyst for dialogue on issues of importance to policymakers and the public. This year, the respected University of Pennsylvania think tank rated KAPSARC in the top quartile for energy think tanks around the world. For the Saudi G20 presidency, KAPSARC was selected to co-lead the think tank engagement group called the T20, and our vice president for research, Dr. Fahad Al-Turki, was appointed the chair of the T20. On a separate track, our work on the CCE guide was used extensively by the G20 energy ministers, and the CCE framework has been adopted by the energy ministers, and that was done at their September meeting. A little bit about the circular carbon economy. Experts agree that the challenge of achieving our climate goals is best met by encouraging all options to manage greenhouse gas emissions. One of the organizing principles of what we call the circular economy is the 3 R's of reduce, reuse, and recycle. Circular carbon economy embraces each of these principles and adds a 4th, or remove. These 4 R's form the basis for carbon management, and Eric is going to tell you a little bit more about that and how energy efficiency links into it in just a second. The CCE framework is an integrated and holistic approach to a more comprehensive, resilient, and climate-friendly energy system that we believe supports and enables sustainable development. CCE encourages the broad development of technologies associated with managing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions. And it really is looking for practical solutions that foster economic well-being and improvements in the quality of life for everyone. Let me introduce Eric, and then I will introduce Kevin. First, Eric Williams is a senior research fellow here at KAPSARC. He has over 20 years of experience as an energy and environmental economist focusing on energy and climate change policy, energy systems analysis, and energy climate change mitigation and adaptation options. Before joining KAPSARC, Eric worked as a utility commission economist and was also a consultant at the OECD. Eric has previously worked at the United Nations and for other research institutes, think tanks, and in the government. Eric, over to you, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. And I'm just going to talk very briefly today about circular carbon economy. And as Adam mentioned, the circular economy is based on the principles of reduce, reuse, and recycle. And circular carbon economy adds the 4th R for remove. And I'll talk a little bit more about those next slide. I think it's helpful to understand circular carbon economy in the context of circular economy, which more people are familiar with. What is the circular economy? Well, it's really a framework for sustainable production and consumption. The circular carbon economy is a framework for climate mitigation that values all options. The scope of the circular economy is on resource and material flows, while the scope of the circular carbon economy is energy and carbon flows. And the goal of the circular economy is to minimize resource consumption and waste disposal, But the goal for circular carbon economy is to manage greenhouse gas emissions, including CO2, toward carbon balance or carbon neutrality or net zero. Next slide. So the figure here is a very simplistic and stylized view of the circular carbon economy. And at the center, you see the circular economy of materials and products. And what drives that circular economy is energy efficiency and energy supply. And through the process in the circular economy of reducing, reusing, and recycling materials and products, you can actually save energy. And that's one aspect of energy efficiency. But you can also make direct investments in technology that will create energy savings through energy efficiency investments. And that's what Kevin will be talking to you today about, specifically about energy efficiency and how it fits in with the circular carbon economy. And more broadly, the energy efficiency along with nuclear and renewables are the reduce element of circular carbon economy. And these measures serve to reduce the amount of CO2 that's generated in the first place. That CO2 that goes to the atmosphere is drawn in through photosynthesis and natural sinks, and that can be harnessed or recycled through bioenergy, and that also then feeds back into circular economy. You can also remove CO2 directly from point sources with carbon capture and store it geologically. You can also remove CO2 directly from the atmosphere with direct air capture and store that geologically. And then finally, CO2 that you've captured, you can also reuse by creating chemical feedstocks or CO2 to fuels and feed those products back into the circular economy. And back to you, Adam.
Okay, Eric, thanks very much for that overview. Dr. Kevin Lane is an energy efficiency expert at the International Energy Agency in Paris. He has over 25 years of experience working with governments around the world, developing energy efficiency policy, especially related to energy using equipment. He has a PhD in statistics and climatology from the Oxford University, and he did postdoctoral research there on the Environmental Change Institute. He's a senior energy efficiency analyst and a member of the Montreal Protocol's Energy Efficiency Task Force, and currently leading an impact of the evaluation of projects under the KCEP Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program. I know that the IEA has done a lot of work, Kevin, on the need for advancing the technology for air conditioning, given the growing needs for air conditioning in places like Asia, Latin America, and Africa, even here in the Middle East, of course, where there are very strong in Saudi Arabia energy efficiency programs for air conditioners. This is terrifically important, and I applaud you for that. He's led the IEA's work on energy efficiency, the energy efficiency chapter of the circular carbon economy. Our book that you can find, as Eric was plugging, at cceguide.org. So Kevin, over to you, please. And we're really looking forward to your remarks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Adam. Yes, so clearly I've done a lot of work on air conditioners, and maybe we'll pick up on that towards the end. Let me see if I can share my screen first.
Starting to come up. We can see it now on regular mode, and you might want to go to presentation mode.
Okay, so hopefully we're there now.
It just did, so we're there.
Yeah. Great, thank you for that introduction, Adam. And yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to give this short presentation. I'm delighted to be here. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to welcome people dialing into this webinar, and very happy to have a discussion at the end of this. So to start with, I think I'm just going to tell you about the role of efficiency in terms of reducing carbon emissions, But I'd like to briefly tell you about the impact of the pandemic at the moment, what that means in terms of efficiency and our recovery packages, but then also highlight the urgency of energy efficiency as well and see what we can do to try and improve energy efficiency. So as Eric just explained, the reduced component of this circular carbon economy has got some main themes in there of efficiency, but also renewables and nuclear. I'll just talk about the energy efficiency part and see that as one of the key components of reducing carbon emissions globally. So reducing
Kevin, the audio is just kind of gone in and out a little bit. Maybe you could get closer to the mic, and if we continue to have the problem, maybe we'll do the slides from our side and just use all of the bandwidth for your audio portion. Go ahead, please.
What about now? Is that any better? I've moved it a little bit closer. Okay, I'll keep going and then tell me if we need to go the other way. So in terms of reducing energy-related carbon emissions, at the IEA we run the World Energy Outlook model, and there we do try to see, well, what are the opportunities for reducing emissions? And I'll take you to the slide there. So if you look at global energy-related CO2 emissions, it's somewhere in about 34 gigatons per annum that are emitted. And if we look at current trends, we expect that to rise at 1–2% per annum going out to 2050. However, there are some policies already stated, and we expect that that might curtail emissions, maybe hold them stable at the mid-30s gigatons per annum. However, that's quite a long way off if we need to try and reduce emissions to be in line with our Paris goals and also other environmental goals like sustainable development goals to try and reduce emissions. So the IEA, we've run something called the Sustainable Development Scenario, which is keeps us on track with our Paris, or it's in line with Paris agreements and those other goals to essentially get us there by 2050 and a little bit beyond. This year we did run another scenario which tries to get us.
Kevin, hold on just one second. Yeah. And Ferris, is there any thoughts on what we can do? The audio is fading in and out.
Yeah, I think we can change the mic. If you Dr. Lane can go to audio settings, then change the mic.
Audio settings.
Next to the mic icon, there is an arrow. If you click, then audio settings.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I can either go to the webcam one. Should we try that one?
Yeah, sure.
Let's try that one, see if that's
much better.
That much better?
Much better. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
In that case, we'll continue with that one. So here we have the World Energy Outlook scenarios, which is where we look at different opportunities to reduce carbon dioxide emissions into the future. And if we look at the big picture, what we have is that energy efficiency is the first fuel in there. We think that by, say, 2040, that could be almost 40% of the emission reductions will come from energy efficiency. Of course, we'll need other things like renewables to fill that gap, and also other low carbon technologies like nuclear. But importantly, there's probably still going to be some role for carbon capture storage and other ways of reducing or removing carbon into the future. And then also, in more detail, we have a look at a lot more different technology options to try and reduce those emissions. So if we look at efficiency alone, by 2040, we think we could actually double the efficiency of the energy system. And just with the efficiency part, we could lower emissions of particulate emissions by about a third in that period. In terms of energy and industry, we could have huge financial savings, say $600 billion by 2040. And consumers as well could have lower energy bills as well, maybe $500+ billion by 2040. So energy efficiency is very good in terms of improving the climate, including the atmosphere, but also lowering energy bills for industry consumers. Our efficient world strategies tries to show that, and that's what we've just been showing you there. So within that period to 2040, we actually expect energy demand to pretty much stay flat, but that's despite in transport, there's maybe twice as many miles traveled. The opportunities are going to come from more efficient cars and trucks, but then also potentially some modal shift as well will be needed as well. In terms of buildings, we expect maybe 20% greater population in that period, 60% more floor space. And the real opportunities are going to come from better space heating and cooling, and also water heating, where technically we'll see most of those energy savings. In terms of industry, by 2040, we expect the value add to be pretty much double over that period as well. And most of the opportunities we think are going to come from the less energy intensive industries. So that'll be making better use of motors or electric heat pumps. In terms of the policies, so how can we do that? So governments have got a very key role in terms of driving that improvement in efficiency. There's basically three main types of policies that governments introduce. There's the regulatory, information and incentives are the three main ones that we'll tend to use. So carrot, stick, and tambourine maybe. So in terms of regulation, these tend to be the most effective ones and the easiest ones to use in some ways. So for energy using products, there are minimum energy performance standards. So these are the eco design regulations in the UK, where they limit what the efficiency can be on products on the market. There's similar types of regulations for buildings, like building codes, and similarly for vehicle fuel efficiency standards as well. So these are mandatories, and these have quite a strict impact on the market. Information such as energy labeling information are quite useful as well. And there's a whole range of incentives, whether that's direct investment from governments through to more interesting schemes such as utility obligation to try and fund upfront costs of some of these more efficient options. Importantly, I think governments have also got a role in setting targets for energy efficiency improvements as well, and raising ambition as well. So I think that's quite a key role that governments have as well. And in addition to that, we also need quite a lot of institutional capacity as well if we're going to run some of these types of programs. And there's a very strong role for international collaboration as well, to try and drive through these different types of policies. So I said I would mention the COVID pandemic and what's happening at the moment. As you're fully aware, it's actually been quite a large impact on the energy industries in the last year. If you look at the change in energy demand over the last century, we see that really it's only been world wars and the Spanish flu 100 years ago that had any similar size of impact. There's been a dramatic impact on the energy system. So maybe a 6% reduction in energy demand is what we think at the moment for 2020. So it's a substantial drop in energy demand that's happened. If we look at carbon as well, let's also see a very dramatic drop, maybe over 3 gigatons fall of carbon, but for the wrong reason. It's because we've had a big shock on the economy, not because we've managed to reduce our carbon emissions in an effective way. In terms of COVID, it's had a dramatic effect. So the economic output has been severely curtailed. So here we just see a chart of for every month of lockdown or containment measures, actually quite a big impact on the output of the economy. And so you see some European economies reducing quite substantially as they went through a lockdown phase in March, April, May time. And so this impact on the economy is quite problematic, in that it's going to have a knock-on effect in terms of the investment that's needed for the energy sector, and especially for energy efficiency as well. So we expect energy efficiency to have maybe a 10% fall in investment in 2020, which is quite a big impact. Of course, there's been a much bigger shock on the oil and gas investment as well, though, so that's a separate discussion. Okay, so in terms of that, it's a useful context in terms about sustainable recovery. So if we look at emissions from the start of 2007 or so, we see that there was a crash then, and we saw emissions dropping by a couple of gigatons almost. But straight afterwards, a huge rebound, and emissions went up quite dramatically as the world became wealthier and increased energy use, basically. However, this year we see a big drop in carbon emissions, and we're now at a juncture. Are we going to reduce our emissions? Or are we going to increase our emissions and get back on the same track? If we don't have any sort of push for more efficiency, more renewables, more low carbon solutions, more other options to reduce emissions, we expect our carbon emissions will rebound within the next 2 or 3 years. Will be as where we are now. However, with the right sort of sustainable recovery, we think we can put the world towards a more or a lower carbon trajectory, one that's in line with our sustainable development scenario and Paris commitments and the like. So earlier this year, we produced something called the Sustainable Recovery Plan. And in here, we're trying to think or try to lay out a very detailed plan of what countries could do that was time limited, very definitive, what it could do over 3 years to try and boost the economy, but also create jobs and improve the energy system as well. So this was our Sustainable Recovery Plan, as we called it. And the crux of it was to spend basically about $1 trillion a year for the next 3 years to try and invest in different parts of society. 1 trillion represents about 0.7% of GDP globally. So it's not a large sum of money. I say not that large, but it's not significant in terms of the global economy. Most of that we thought would be going to efficiency, and efficiency we chose because it was an area where you get a very rapid uptake in terms of spending the money and also on jobs as well. And I'll come back to that. So from this recovery plan, we also expected that GDP would probably be 1% per annum higher because of this spend in money. So maybe 3% higher over the next few years. So this plan would then add money to the economy and drive up GDP, which is seen as a good thing. And we did this in conjunction with the International Monetary Fund as well, who helped us do some of this economic analysis. So in terms of jobs in the energy industry, we think there's maybe 6 million at risk in 2020. And with this recovery plan, we could maybe have 9 million per year over the next 3 years. And most of those are likely to be in the energy efficiency sector. So I thought I'd leave you with, end on this slide for the stimulus part, just to show you the reasons why so much effort was put into energy efficiency. It was mainly because, well, as our executive director calls it a jobs machine. So pretty much for every $1 million that you invest in efficiency, you might get, say, 15 jobs in energy efficient buildings or retrofit buildings, where in other parts of the energy sector, it'll be a lower number. Solar PV is the other area where you might get a lot of jobs being created by investing these sums of money. Also, you can spend it on more efficient equipment as well, and you might get quite a lot of jobs in the supply side as well. So for appliances, you might get maybe 10 jobs per every $1 million spent by the government. And the figures are a little bit higher in emerging and developing economies. Okay, and this is just a quick marginal abatement curve, just to show you the amount of carbon emissions saved by introducing these measures, and then also the net costs on the y-axis as well. So you tend to see that energy efficiency is actually a negative cost if you, for some efficiency measures, that any upfront costs are repaid through lower running costs, but most of them are running, a big chunk of that is under $25 per ton of CO2 that's been abated. This particular package is then going to reduce emissions by over 4 gigatons, have some benefits on reducing air pollution, and then also lower running costs to consumers because of these measures. Okay, so that's what we can do at the moment in terms of our recovery packages. What I want to briefly just talk about is energy efficiency in the bigger picture again. So if we go back and look at energy efficiency in general, so the way we normally measure energy efficiency is to look at energy intensity. So we look at GDP per unit of energy used, and then we say, well, are we able to generate more GDP from the same unit of energy over time? And what we're showing here is the improvement each year. So actually it's a fall in each year. So in 2015, it took 3% less energy to produce the same amount of GDP than the previous year. So it's an annual change. So what we're looking to do is try and have this figure as high as possible. If we wanted to reach our sustainable development goals, we probably needed to be at 2.6% for that whole period. But at the moment, you can see for the last few years, we've been falling beneath that level. So it's been in decline, and initial figures for 2020 would be about 0.7, 0.8%. So it's quite a big drop, but that's in large part due to the economic downturn that's creating that. But what it does mean is if we want to be on our sustainable development path, our sustainable development scenario, we need to be at something like 3.5% energy intensity improvement for the next 20 years. So it's quite an increase in what's been happening for the last 5 years, and we haven't really seen that since 2015, and even before then it hasn't been that high. So there is an urgent need to increase the energy efficiency of our global energy system if we're going to meet our Paris commitments and help reduce carbon emissions. So to respond to that, at the IEA, we actually set up something called the Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency. And here we were very fortunate to get 23 members on here, ranging from government ministers. I think at the time there was 9 that were government ministers, like Senator Kowalski, Mikulski. It was led by the then Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar of Ireland. So I think it was 13, 14 ministers involved there, but then also thought leaders from around the world, so experts in the field, and even Adam Szymanski in there as well. So we're delighted that you could be part of this, very, an exceptional panel of people there. It really was amazing people there that were included. So we're very humble that you can have this group of people here. So managed to have people together before the pandemic, so you can see them in the room trying to see come up with ideas on how we could accelerate progress on efficiency, but their focus, I think, changed after the COVID-19 pandemic. So clearly did all the meetings remotely, and I think the messages maybe altered a little bit, and what they came out with was a rather nice report with just 10 very simple or clear recommendations of how we can scale up action on improving energy efficiency. So these are all very sensible and really well targeted policy recommendations. And there's a good report that goes with it. And along there's very good policy examples that are happening around the world already. So, number 2 is to try and focus on job creation. So for a lot of countries, there are good co-benefits between job creation and investment in energy efficiency. So this is focusing on some of these multiple benefits as a good way of driving energy efficiency. And then there's other parts as well. I've now engaging all levels of society. So it's not just the governments, but making sure you take consumers along as well. Also, not just national government, but it should be international government or cities as well, for example. I think what I'll do is we might come back to these in terms of questions if we have any, but this is actually an excellent set of recommendations that the Commission came up with in terms of how we're going to drive energy efficiency over the next few years. So I'd like to summarize very briefly and just say that energy efficiency is really a key to the reducing component of this CCE framework that you have, and it's key to reducing carbon dioxide emissions in general. Maybe 40% over the next 10, 20 years are going to have to come from energy efficiency if we're to meet our sustainable targets. In terms of the solutions, the technical solutions are generally already known to pretty much double efficiency in the next 20 years. So it's not that there are unknown solutions, although that will help us if we find more efficient ways of doing things, but the technology is essentially there. In terms of policy, I think that's what's going to be needed to drive it, and we do have some very good policy already in terms of what drives efficiency. And also finalize by saying governments are spending and starting to spend a lot more money in terms of pandemic recovery, and I think some of that could very usefully be used not only to increase GDP, but to generate jobs, but should also be used to try and put us on the right path towards a clean energy transition. And at that point, I'll hand back to you, Adam.
Great, Kevin. Thank you very much. And thanks for that plug for the IEA's Commission on Energy Efficiency. You know, I found that to be really interesting. There are a lot of things going on in areas outside of the United States and Europe on energy efficiency. And one of the goals of the Commission was to highlight the opportunity set for energy efficiency actions in many countries. I spoke about some of the activities that have been underway in Saudi Arabia for some time. There's the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center. There are pretty strict efficiency regulations for air conditioning in the kingdom, as well as a number of industrial applications and a program for automobile vehicle energy efficiency that's actually fairly similar to the ones in the United States, which are considered to be some of the more progressive. What we found here in Saudi Arabia was that that a lot of these energy efficiency programs had fairly rapid paybacks. That these were not cost imposing solutions, but actually cost savings solutions, and that's a really important part. And of course, I think that ultimately will be the key to other ideas and other technologies in the circular carbon economy, finding ways to accelerate the technology to allow this to become, in a sense, a paying proposition rather than something that people look at as a cost that's being imposed. You know, that's not going to be easy, but clearly that is going to be a much more effective solution in our view. We've had a number of questions that come up. Kevin, I mentioned air conditioning a few times, and I know that was a big part of the Commission's activity too. Are there options that are on the table? What's the IEA has been looking at technology, I know has been involved in technology acceleration activities. What are the opportunities there? What kind of international collaboration might we have to really get at this issue of air conditioning energy use?
Yeah, very good question. And yeah, something that, yeah, the IEA, we identified maybe a couple of years ago, and our executive director called it a blind spot, that there was actually a big amount of energy use from air conditioning coming along in the pipeline. So whereas we're using maybe 2 terawatt hours of electricity now for air conditioners, by 2050, that could be, say, 3 times as much, maybe 6,000 terawatt hours. It's a huge amount of energy that's going to be going that way. And certainly needed for lots of countries as well. So there are parts in Southeast Asia, there's a whole belt in North Africa that will actually need to have this air conditioning for comfortable living, for being more productive. So yeah, that air conditioning is needed. In terms of technology, yes, if you look at the markets around the world, there's already a very big range on the market already to pretty much double efficiency already. So I think the technology in terms of air conditioners does exist, but we can go even further than that. And I suppose, yeah, and the other technology, there are other technologies available, whether that's better buildings, so we don't need as much cooling. There's even some nice retrofits, just painting roofs white in some countries, going to work really well, just as a very low cost, very quick and easy way of improving thermal comfort and being able to done very, very quickly. But you're right, yeah, it's what do we do internationally about this? I think there's probably several things. One is even just measuring the efficiency of these air conditioners is more challenging. I think we can do it better, and working internationally, I think we can get better test procedures and all be testing them in a similar way, which helps with benchmarking these products. So if you look at the efficiency of air conditioners around the world, they're actually not directly comparable. So you sometimes see our charts with different ones. They're actually a little bit different because they're being tested differently. So there's certainly scope for that. I think there's scope for, well, lots of things. In terms of energy, one of the big things is air conditioners, but also refrigerators and so mobile air conditioners in cars. They're all using F-gases. And I think this is also perhaps also an opportunity as well as a problem as well. So under the Montreal Protocol, there's the Kigali Amendment has been signed, which is trying to phase down some of these refrigerants with high global warming potential. So,
right.
Yeah,
And,
so within
and of
that,
course, it's all virtually all of the air conditioning is reliant on producing the electricity cleanly to begin with, and that's an important aspect too that we've discussed elsewhere in the circular carbon economy. Hey, Eric, there's actually a question that I think is we might just throw over to you. Which segment of the 4 Rs, so of reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove, where does methane fit? It's not exactly an efficiency question, but it's an interesting one that's come up.
So in terms of reducing methane leaks, I would say it would be under reduce, and it would be a pretty near-term option. Longer term, I mean, of course, you would have to reduce those methane leaks, but you also have to, manage the emissions from using that methane on a longer-term basis. But, as far as methane leaks directly, I would say reduce.
Right. One of the other questions was when you look at the technology associated with recycling, some of our listeners, participants have noted that there are other taxonomies, other ways of classifying technologies within the 4R framework that show more than just bioenergy and recycling. Could you just quickly kind of describe what the taxonomy issues are when we try to talk about the 4Rs?
Sure, Adam. I mean, this does come up, and there are a couple of different, ways that people have defined the Rs. The way KAPSARC does it is all of the technologies that you would think of in terms of carbon utilization, we characterize those under reuse. And then we have recycling dedicated to bioenergy. Others make a distinction between keeping CO2 in its, as CO2 as reuse, and then recycling as altering that CO2. I think, ultimately, I think the 4Rs are a framework for, thinking about how to manage emissions. And I think that, as long as we have all of the elements that we need to, it maybe doesn't matter so much which R they get allocated to, but I would invite anyone who's interested to check out the CCE guide on www.cceguide.org and take a look at the reuse report that was written by the International Energy Agency, which includes all of the elements that you may have seen other people talk about in terms of recycling.
Yeah, Eric, I just can't help myself in thinking of it this way, that we have reduce, and we know what that means, keep it from getting into the atmosphere. And then I put recycle and reuse into like maybe one category, and then we need the remove because it's pretty clear that we have to move in some cases towards getting CO2 out of the atmosphere. And so my 4Rs are reduce, reuse, recycle. That's one. Remove, and then repeat. We have to keep doing it until we get the job done. So for all of you out there, I mean, I'm really serious about this. There are lots of different ways that you can talk about this. We were trying to make it easy for people to understand. And I think that the real issue, and Kevin outlined it. Kevin, I love that one slide of yours, and we might want to bring it up again for one of the other questions, which was, what have you found to be the best practices to monetize energy efficiency? What are the best technologies from a cost standpoint? And I know you had that curve where some things, and this is again what I was saying about Saudi Arabia, vehicle efficiency is pretty low cost solution, and a number of others are, and it might be worthwhile for people to refer when we either to the recording or to the slides that we'll put up, or Kevin, if you can figure out how to put that slide up again. Or Ferris, do you have it? And then in the meantime. There we go. I think it's coming.
Let's have a look.
Yep. That's the one. Yep, you're on the one. That's it. And now if you can show it full screen. Just go backwards.
Yeah, we'll do it that way. That's the one.
That's it. Right. So new efficient vehicles, efficiency. I heard Kevin mention building envelopes are a pretty low hanging fruit in terms of costs. Electric motors, the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center actually has some fairly decent rules on electric motor efficiency, I think, here in the kingdom. Appliance efficiency, shipping, and so on. Heat pumps, it looks like the more expensive end of of this presentation is industrial heat pumps and a few other things. You know, one of the interesting ones that I see here, Kevin, is the relatively higher cost of clean cooking, and that's an area that the G20 energy ministers actually identified as something very important. And the whole G20, Saudi Arabia, has identified clean cooking as a very important aspect of the kind of energy and health issue, particularly for women and children who are often at home and are subject to the problems associated with some of the traditional cooking fuels. So finding technological accelerators for clean cooking looks to me to be something that would be pretty important. Kevin, did you want to comment on the idea of, you know, what are the best practices here that could help people push these solutions?
Yeah, for sure. So this curve here was, well, it's a marginal abatement curve is what it's called. This was specifically for the recovery program that we had. So this was a time limited 3-year. But you can see these curves saying, well, what could it be going over 20 years? And on the very right, you could have carbon capture storage, which might be more expensive. But I think for most of these, I think the policy approach that you take will actually affect what the cost really is. So if you want to try and have rebates to get everyone to have more efficient motors, it might actually cost you a lot more than if you introduce minimum standards to introduce more efficient motors. So I think your policy approach can actually have a difference. And also if you signal that long-term in advance, you can scale up production for a lot of things, like appliances can be mass produced, they can be mass produced more efficiently. So I think we definitely do have better options of ways or better policies that will make things more cost effective and cheaper to make anyway.
Right. Kevin, one of the questions that's come up, and you might have a thought on it, how about desalinization plants and their consumption of energy? I know here in Saudi Arabia that there's been an effort to move both electricity production and desal to natural gas from oil, and that would have a savings for carbon dioxide. And I think it is a pretty good way to go. KAPSARC actually did a study on that you could find on the KAPSARC website, www.kapsarc.org. Thoughts, Kevin? Anything?
So very briefly, that's, yeah, probably outside of my scope. I'd say very quickly, there's probably a whole parallel CCE for water conservation as well. So I think you can have more efficient use of water, and then just how do you get that clean water at the end as well. So I think, yeah, there are parallels with more efficient use of water, whether it's in washing machines, toilets, showers. So I think there is an efficiency component.
There's an opportunity set there. You know, one of the, that's an interesting, you've triggered another thought, Kevin. As part of the T20 activity, KAPSARC, along with the King Faisal Center for Research in Islamic Studies, co-hosted the T20 for Saudi Arabia. And there was a pretty strong, interesting set of recommendations from the T20. And there was a task force on sustainable energy, water, and food. They actually had a very interesting dialogue workshop was held on that. And a number of reports have been written. They are available on the T20 website. I think you can find the link to that on KAPSARC's website. They actually did identify, Kevin, the idea of water and food as additional sources of opportunity sets for both improvements in people's health and well-being, as well as dealing with CO2. And right, I think that in a number of cases, I remember from my days at the Energy Information Administration that there is an enormous amount of electricity used in California, for example, to move water around and to clean the water, you know, that the wastewater, water is a fairly big consumer of energy in a lot of areas, and not just Saudi Arabia, but elsewhere in the world. And finding technologies there is another, I think, useful idea. Key investment strategy or model to help improve energy efficiency in countries like India. What's the IEA doing, Kevin, to look at the bigger economies, developing economies in places like India, maybe Africa, Latin America? Is there a particular opportunity set that we should be thinking about for countries like this as far as energy efficiency is concerned?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, well, certainly, yeah, China, India, they are the largest consumers of energy and very large economies. So the IEA, we do have some programs or supporting those governments on some of them. And they do provide some actually also additional very interesting examples of energy efficiency as well. So I think India, they've got one fabulous program, the Jala program. And this is one where it's almost a super ESCO. They've been able to, as a government, to get funds to provide upfront costs for more efficient, I think LEDs is probably the most well-known one at the moment. So they've managed to source very efficient and very low-cost LED lamps and roll them out to the population, and the population pays them back with small amounts of money. So that's actually a fantastic example of them raising the finance and pushing just these super efficient lamps from no lamps or incandescent lamps straight towards LED lamps. So they've missed out going to CFLs and having mercury and other issues around those. And they've ended up with high quality and reliable lamps going into people's homes. So there are good examples in some emerging economies as well.
Right, lighting, I guess, is a big thing. You know,
and such a big efficiency improvement as well. So we've got an incandescent at say 12 lumens per watt. We now get LED lamps at 100 lumens per watt. And if you can already buy one, I think in your region nearby, you can buy a 200 lumens per watt lamp. So that's 10 times, 20 times. So it's using 5% or 10% of the energy that it was using. It's a dramatic improvement in efficiency that we're seeing. So for lighting is the showcase example of improved efficiency for sure.
Eric, one that I might throw your way, is there, when you look at the 4 R's, is one of these or the technologies associated with the 4 R's more cost effective? I mean, is that?
I mean, I think, you know, as Kevin mentioned and you know, showed in his marginal abatement cost curve, I think there are obviously a lot of investments that you can make in energy efficiency that are cost effective without any you know, additional incentive. And so there are a lot of opportunities certainly in energy efficiency for that. But I think, you know, in other areas of the R's, there are also low cost opportunities. I wouldn't necessarily say that one is you know, overwhelmingly lower cost than another, although energy efficiency, you know, if you had to pinpoint one, maybe that would be it. And maybe Kevin can speak more to this, but you know, we do see that there are clear benefits to investing in energy efficiency, but there are barriers in the way for people to do that. And so I think there's still plenty of room for policy to try to encourage those investments in energy efficiency. But I think, in the bigger picture, in terms of our longer term climate goals, I think that we need all of the above, and we need all of the R's, and we need to make sure that we have the technologies available in place to invest throughout the circular carbon economy to reach those goals.
I'm going to try to make this short. One of the things that's been clearly identified by just about everybody that's looked at this is that you can't get to our climate goals, including things like the Paris Agreement, without using all of the options that are on the table. Clearly, the reduced options of efficiency, renewables, fuel switching, hydrogen could fit into there. These have been the most effective so far, but that alone is not sufficient to get to the necessary level of mitigation that's necessary. And that's why the 4R concept is a powerful one, because what it says is, look, everybody should be trying to do everything that they can within their own national context and their own cost and regulatory and legal structures and so on to go after the problem. Some people think that Saudi Arabia is only interested in oil. There is a huge energy efficiency program here because it makes sense in Saudi Arabia. And in a sense, that is what the 4R concept says, is use all of the tools in the toolbox. I have kind of a joke. I say, look, if you're going to build a house, you need more than a hammer. So and renewables are a great solution, and they're the largest green hydrogen project in the world is in Saudi Arabia. But that alone is not sufficient. Efficiency, as you've seen today, is realistic. It's already underway. It has cost-effective opportunity sets in a lot of places, but that one alone is not sufficient either. We've got to do all these things. Kevin, I'm kind of on my soapbox. Maybe you'd like to try it.
Oh, that's completely right. There's certainly going to be no technology solution that's going to be, get us towards our Paris goals and beyond. So we do need to, nothing should be off the table at this point for sure. And I think even if we use all of those tools, I think we still got quite a challenge to get down to net zero by 2050. And there probably are other things that we need to do. So I suspect we've got quite a challenge on our hands. So we'll use your full toolbox, Adam.
Well, thank you for that. Eric, we have time for a question from you, and then I have a little statement to make at the end. Eric, do you have any questions for Kevin?
Yeah, so Kevin, you talked about air conditioning as a growing demand that needs to be addressed, and I think people are mobilizing around that to begin to address that issue. Are there any other looming demand increases like this on the horizon that we should be aware of and should start thinking about addressing? Yeah,
it's a good question, because we described it as a blind spot because we hadn't seen it, we hadn't really spent much effort on it. We now are getting some ideas on how we do it, whether there's actually a nice report from T20 on saying what we can do internationally on air conditioners. There's a COP26 initiative trying to raise ambitions on air conditioners. In terms of other areas, well, I suppose a lot of them we just know that they're coming along. So if you look at if there's 1 billion cars on the road today, by 2050 there's going to be 2 billion. So it's a huge slug of energy that we know is on its way. It's just we just know it's on its way. So maybe there are big changes that are going to happen to our energy system, but we're more aware of them, I suspect. And I guess the challenge is what that energy system is going to look like and how we can manage our way through that. And I guess that's going to take a lot of us to work our way through.
The other one, Kevin, that I've always seen as identified is building envelopes, existing buildings and technology to improve efficiency in existing buildings.
So that one I think is, it's just how do we renovate them? So certainly in northern climates, there are some old buildings that's going to take a lot of money and ways to improve them.
All right, we have a tradition here of trying to wrap these up. We've got just a minute or two left. Before I thank you, Kevin, for joining us today, there was one question that said, how can we get more people in around the world and even in Saudi Arabia to think about the circular carbon economy and the message set there? There is an effort underway in the kingdom being headed by His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman at the Energy Ministry to look at how Saudi Arabia could not just be part of the solution, but to actually lead the solution on this and finding ways to show how Saudi Arabia is actually already putting into place a lot of the principles of the circular carbon economy, and how through financial instruments and regulatory instruments and voluntary actions, how we might see even more being done in the circular carbon economy. So there is an effort underway, and stay tuned for more on that. I think that the G20 ministers are actually talking about ways of highlighting in general the need to move forward on solutions for greenhouse gas emissions, and that could be part of the G20 coming up. Kevin, I want to thank you very much. I want to thank the International Energy Agency for working with KAPSARC and the other international organizations that did the CCE guide. Eric, thank you for your contributions to the guide and to our webinar today. We will post the recording, and Kevin has said he would be glad to make those slides available. We'll put those on the website. That'll be available within a day or two. Please look for that. And if we didn't get to your question, we're going to try to actually put together a frequently asked question section of the cceguide.org website, and that's under development. We hope to have that up soon. And we wish all of you a good rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. Thanks everybody for joining us, and please do your part in dealing with the challenges that we have in front of us. Thank you, everybody, and bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.